A highly contagious disease has just re-entered our country after more than 2 decades, and things are not looking good. And I know what you guys are probably thinking. I know, Ron, another disease to watch out for. But believe me, guys, I want to tell you that this one, it's not even connected to any kind of respiratory diseases like the flu, COVID, or even RSV. It's not even connected to the one that the CDC, the WHO, the WHO, and even the World Economic Forum warns us about. And speaking of these groups, it's fair to say that some trust has been lost throughout the past few years as data suggests that we may have been lied to by these very people. You don't say. It's led to more and more of us avoiding jabs and vaccines, thinking that maybe there's a problem that's going to be found out about them a few years down the line. But remember what they were saying about these drugs at the end of last year?
The COVID vaccine statistics are out for the South Bay, and they're not good. In fact, Santa Clara County officials say fewer vaccinations are leading to a rise in both holiday COVID cases and hospitalizations. NBC Bay Area Scott Budman spoke to officials and doctors about the numbers and the consequences.
Yeah, we also spoke to people, Garvin, and they're just not getting the latest booster shot. In fact, the numbers, as you said, are down. And doctors say that's especially dangerous as we head into the holidays and into the peak of winter.
Now, so
if you hit the street in the South Bay and ask if people got the latest COVID booster,
I have not. I meant to.
As soon as it came out.
you'll get mixed results.
Last time I got a booster was the second shot in 2021.
But Santa Clara County says overall, less than 1 out of every 5 of us recently rolled up our sleeves.
Overall, 19%. And what we're particularly concerned about is that certain ethnic groups, our Latinx and our African ancestry, are even lower at 9 and 11% respectively.
Doctors say that means more risk.
Cases are not just high, Scott, they're increasing.
And more crowded hospitals as we head into the winter holidays.
It's crystal clear that this is a case of mistrust. Many Americans feel betrayed to a point given that we've been lied to during the health crisis. I mean, Pfizer's CEO did it right to our faces, guys. They told us about transmissions being stopped when in reality, the drugs that they produced, they did jack squat in stopping transmissions. Now, it's not just Big Pharma that lost trust, right? The World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and even the CDC lost trust of a lot of people. That is, if any of us even trusted them in the first place. But what about this contagious disease that's back on American soil? It's called measles, and believe it or not, guys, it was declared eliminated more than 20 years ago. So what the freak happened, right? Well, this means that it was no longer a threat here in the United States back then, but just recently, the threat is now back.
So where does this stand? What is the latest on measles?
Afternoon, Glenda. So here's since December, there have been 8 confirmed cases of measles in Philadelphia. Now, health officials reported that all cases involved people that were, this is important, who are not vaccinated. Additional cases have also been identified in Delaware, New Jersey, and Washington State. Plus, there's a report of a person with measles who traveled through airports in the D.C. area. So despite the disease being declared eliminated back in 2000, outbreaks are still happening. In Michigan, there was a large outbreak with 44 confirmed cases back in 2019, 40 of which occurred in Oakland County. The initial case was traced back to someone who traveled to New York from Israel. Now, travel outside the country, that's one of the ways, Glenda, Americans become exposed to measles. The outbreak in Philadelphia is also reportedly linked to a person who traveled outside the U.S.
So the CDC says 41 cases last year. That's fairly lower than recent years. So why the concern?
Yeah, it's important, right? So why are people worried? There are a few reasons. One is that measles is highly contagious, and somebody with measles coughs, sneezes, or talks even, infectious droplets can hang in the air for folks to breathe in for roughly an hour. Another reason is that roughly 1 in 5 people, 1 in 5 that get the disease end up in the hospital. That's because measles can cause complications, serious ones, including diarrhea, bacterial ear infections, bronchitis, pneumonia, encephalitis, which is inflammation of the brain, right? And some even die from this virus. So can't take it lightly.
I'm sure you guys heard about it, but I'm gonna go ahead and speak about it again, right? So the reason as to why these measles cases are rising is because less and less people are getting vaccinated. Now, again, going back to what I said at the beginning of the video, people are becoming more and more wary of taking jabs because of the fear that it's put into the people, right? So the worst part report is that it's affecting infants, it's affecting toddlers, and, as they are the ones that are most vulnerable to these viruses. Now, of course, that's not their decision, right? They have parents who decide for them. But there's no denying that there are now fears connected to vaccines, even ones that, we're already familiar with. Granted that this may have also been influenced by the health crisis, especially since, we had more people just kind of staying at home and wearing masks and all that stuff, right? But something else that was mentioned in that report that has some people questioning what's going on at the borders. You see, he mentioned something about people carrying measles who traveled outside of the United States. Now, it's no secret that, there's a lot of people that continue to go through our borders, a reality that many of us have to deal with. From there, think about a few of those nations. For example, Colombia, Brazil, Venezuela, right? Do you know that these three lead the list in the countries that have the Zika virus? Now, that's not saying that these people are purposely bringing in a virus into the country. That's not it at all. But the risk is there. Now, the concern is warranted given that we don't know who's coming in and out the country nowadays. And it's something that needs to be considered given that we don't want to risk another pandemic.
The record number of migrants crossing into the U.S. pushing resources to the limit in many American cities. Now hospitals are sounding the alarm, saying they're also overwhelmed, including some far from the border. Julia Ainsley has our report.
Tonight, the border crisis surging. Officials telling NBC News there were over 200,000 illegal crossings at the southern border last month, and a record 3 million migrants crossed the border in the last year. Now, a new warning 1,000 miles away in New York City, where officials tell us resources are overwhelmed. Across public hospitals in New York City over the last year, nearly 30,000 visits by migrants and 300 new babies born to migrant moms. Staff here at Bellevue Hospital tell us they're eager to help, but the numbers are tough.
This has been the hardest work that I've ever done, but it's been the most impactful work that I've ever done.
And most of the visits to the taxpayer-funded legal clinic here are by migrants.
Our clinics are full, and there are waiting lists, and people are turning people away or referring them to other places.
Randy Redkin from New York's Legal Assistance Group says so many migrants are asking for legal help on asylum representation and health care access. Now, she says, American citizens who need legal assistance with issues like eviction and insurance have to wait up to 10 weeks.
If you ask me, do we need more resources for legal services? I would say absolutely yes.
This was proven last year when it was announced in New York that many of the people who arrived there had either lived or traveled through countries with high rates of tuberculosis. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. TB is treatable, but it does take months to get through it. So I guess you guys now understand the sort of stigma that kind of comes with these measles outbreaks that we're now seeing and have been having. The biggest issue now is that it's going to take a long time for the likes of the CDC and the WHO to regain the trust of the people, especially as they're the ones that continue to warn us about these different diseases. But what do you guys think about all this? I do want to touch briefly on a topic related to this, and before I say it, take this with a grain of salt, okay? Because there is an idea that this could be happening in order to bring back mail-in voting. But again, this is just a rumor that's been swirled around. I'm not saying that it is, I'm not saying that it's not. It's just what some of us are thinking about right now. Now, before I go, I just want to thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks for liking the video, thank you for subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.